Your next reading is long-lived assets. Let's try to understand this reading through questions as our usual method of gripping these readings. Question number 1. Mammoth Incorporated reports under US GAAP. Mammoth has begun a long-term project to develop inventory control software for external sale. On its financial statement, Mammoth should do what? It's an intangible asset. Let us see what the US GAAP says. US GAAP ASC 730 says research costs and development cost both are expensed when incurred. Whereas IFRS I-38 says research cost expensed but development cost may be capitalized if certain criteria is met. What is research and development? Let us discuss. Research means a planned search and development to discover something new, some new knowledge. That is research. Once research has been completed, translating that research finding into a plan or design, it's called development. FASB says research and development both must be expensed. IFRS says research must be expensed. Development can be capitalized if these 6 conditions are fulfilled. There is technical feasibility of the completion of the asset. The organization has the intention to complete the asset. Organization has the ability to use or sell the asset. The way in which the organization will generate probable future economic benefits, it has to be shown. The firm must also demonstrate availability of resources to complete and use or sell the asset. And finally, the firm must demonstrate ability to measure reliably expenditures attributable to the asset. These 6 conditions, if met all of these, then development cost can be capitalized under IFRS. Remember, IFRS allows development cost to be capitalized, research is expensed, whereas FASB, Federal Accounting Standard Board, US-based GAAP, research and development cost both must be expensed. There is an exception to this rule. Remember, the computer software cost can be capitalized provided there is a technical feasibility. That's just an exception relating to computer software. This question also involves computer software. Mammoth has begun a long-term project to develop inventory control software for external sale. On its financial statement, Mammoth should, usually what we do, all the research and development costs are expensed under the US GAAP, but for computer software, if there is technological feasibility, then the cost can be capitalized. So expense all cost of this project until the technological feasibility has been established. That's an important point that must be remembered. So that makes C to be your correct option, and C it is. Next, Falker Incorporated owns a piece of specialized machinery. The original cost of the machinery was $500,000 original cost, and to date there is an accumulated depreciation balance of $140,000. Which of the following will Falker recognize on its income statement if it sells its machinery for $400,000? Okay, let us first see what is the net book value. Net book value, or the carrying value, it is the difference between cost minus the depreciation charged so far, called accumulated depreciation. Cost is $500,000 original historical cost. Accumulated depreciation charge so far is $140,000. It means the carrying value or the net book value of this asset is $360,000, right? If an asset with the carrying value or the net book value of $360,000 is being sold for $400,000, clearly there is a gain on disposal. Simple. That makes B to be your correct option, gain on disposal. Next, which of the following is the best estimate by the ratio of net property, plant, equipment to an annual depreciation? There are 3 formulas you need to learn. These 3 useful calculations in years for an analyst. Let us use some imaginary or some fictitious numbers to understand this idea. Let's say we have property, plant and equipment worth $150,000. So far we have charged accumulated depreciation based upon 5 years life to be let's say let's say it's $60,000. And this is your net book value, 90. Now we can use these formulas to get just an estimate of the average age of the assets, total useful life, and remaining useful life. We can see from here the total life is 5 years. Since out of 5 years, 2 years depreciation has already been charged, it means the remaining life is 3 years, right? So we can use these formulas to calculate the average age. Average age is the accumulated depreciation, that is 60, divided by the annual depreciation expense. What is the annual depreciation expense? Let's say 150,000 is the cost. We charge straight line basis, means every year the depreciation charge is $30,000, right? So $30,000, 60, it means average age is 2 years, right? What is the total useful life? We know it's 5 years, but using this formula we can find out. Historical cost is 150. Annual depreciation charge is 35. Exactly 5 years there. What is the remaining useful life? Ending net property, plant and equipment, net book value is 90. Annual depreciation is 30. 90 by 33. Yes, we know the remaining life. So these are three useful formulas. They are not absolute numbers, because some assets might have longer useful life, some have less. It's just an average, an aggregate, you can say. So average age or total useful life or remaining useful life, you can use these formulas to calculate different lives. So what exactly is required in this question? It says, which of the following is the best estimate by the ratio of net property, plant, equipment to annual depreciation? Net property, plant and equipment, that the closing balance of property, plant and equipment divided by the annual depreciation, this will give you the remaining useful life. That is C. And C it is. Next, under the US GAAP, an asset is impaired when? Let me show you how do we impair the US GAAP based impairment. Under the US GAAP, there is two-step impairment. In the first step, you do what you call a recoverability test. You compare the carrying value or the book value of the asset with the undiscounted future cash flows. Undiscounted future cash flows are the recoverable amounts which you will recover. Simply what you will collect in the future years, adding them all up will give you the undiscounted future cash flows. If your carrying value or net book value is more than the undiscounted future cash flows, that is recoverable amount, it means the asset has been impaired. What is the impairment? Under step 2, impairment loss is the carrying value versus the fair value, right? So that's the method we use to calculate impairment under the US GAAP. So it says, under the US GAAP, an asset is impaired when the present value of future cash flows. There is no present value, undiscounted future cash flows. There is no discounting in the US GAAP for asset impairment, long-lived asset impairment. Incorrect. A option is incorrect. Accumulated depreciation plus salvage value exceeds acquisition cost. There is no such term, no such items in the impairment test we've just seen. Incorrect. Yes, there is an impairment when the firm can no longer recover the carrying amount of the asset, means the carrying value is more than the undiscounted future cash flows, or what you call the recoverable amount. So if your carrying value is more, amount to be recovered is less, it means the asset has been impaired. What is the impairment? The difference between your carrying value and the fair value. This difference will give you the impairment loss. Under the US GAAP, once the asset is impaired, the impairment cannot be reversed. Keep it in mind. Next question. C is the answer. This is a tough one that requires some serious understanding, some serious deliberation. Mayer Investment Advisory and Smith Brothers Investments are operationally identical, both of these firms, except that Mayer's capitalizes some costs that Smith expenses. Mayer's capitalizes some costs that Smith expenses. That's the difference. So compared to Smith, Mayer is likely to have what? These are the ratios discussed: debt to equity, debt to assets. Then he has discussed the cash flow from operations, cash flow from investing, return on assets, return on equity. Let us discuss these one by one. This is a very good question for understanding purpose. All these ratios in case if we capitalize certain costs and if we don't capitalize certain costs. Let us discuss these one by one in detail. Okay, here we go. First, in case of Mayors, Mayor capitalizes some costs. Since he is capitalizing the costs, he is not charging any cost as an expense. Equity will have a higher balance because no expense charged, equity would be higher. Resultantly, debt upon equity in this case, overall ratio would be lower. But Smith is doing the other way around. He is charging it as a cost. Any cost, expense reduces equity. If equity is reduced, debt upon equity, this ratio goes up. What about the debt ratio assets? Since Smith is capitalizing the cost, he is increasing his assets. When assets go up, debt upon assets, this ratio will fall. But Smith, he is not capitalizing, he is expensing. His asset base would be lower. For him, the ratio would be higher. Right. Next difference, cash flow from operations. Since Mayors is not considering it as an expense, he is capitalizing, his operating cash flows would be higher. He is capitalizing this cost, resultantly he is considering it as an investing outflow. His operating outflows, his operating cash flows would be higher because he is capitalizing since the asset is being constructed. So this investment in asset will be considered as an investing outflow. So he will have cash flow investing activity comparatively lower. But for Smith, since he is expensing it out, so his operating cash flows would be lower as the investing cash flows would be higher. So far, so good. Now there is something interesting that you need to learn. Return on equity and return on assets. In most of the cases, these ratios are less than 1. Why? Because your profit would be smaller number compared to equity. Your assets will be much larger compared to your return, your net income. Which means these two ratios are expected to be return on equity and return on assets. These ratios are expected to be less than 1. We have discussed in our previous lectures, whenever a ratio is less than 1, if the same number is added to the numerator and denominator, the ratio improves. If the same number is deducted from the numerator and denominator, the ratio falls. Applying this idea on ROA and ROE in case of Mayors, since what Mayor is doing, he is capitalizing. He is capitalizing the cost, which means he is increasing his asset base. Since asset base is increasing, expenses are not, the item is not being charged as an expense. Resultantly, his income is higher. By the same amount, his assets are higher. When the numerator and denominator same amount is being added in both, the ratio would improve in the early periods. But in the later periods, when these assets will be depreciated, same amount will be deducted from your net income as depreciation and same amount will be deducted from the asset base. So when same amount is deducted in the numerator denominator, the later periods ROA will be lower. This is when I'm talking about Mayors. Higher in the earlier year, lower in the later years. Same thing for return on equity. Return on equity follows the same principle. Any asset that is being capitalized, your income will show higher, your equity will be higher. So both numerator denominator increase by the same amount. So this ratio would be higher in the early period. When we will start depreciating or amortizing that asset, same amount will be deducted from the numerator, from net income, and as a loss or reduction from equity. When the net income falls, your equity falls. So in the later subsequent periods, it will be lower. It will be totally reverse for Smith Company. Why? Because for Smith Company, return on assets and return on equity, in the early periods, he is charging these as expenses. Resultantly, in early periods, his return on assets and return on equity would be lower. And subsequently, they will be high. Now, that's a comparative analysis. All ratios discussed in a single question. It's an amazing question. Questions like these must be attempted in detail, must be dealt with in a finer way so that you get better understanding. Now, we have done all what was required. Let us see these options one by one and see which of these is the right one. Comparing Mayors with Smith Bro, Mayor has high debt to equity. Yes. And high debt to assets in the early periods. No, this is the final answer. This is what we took as equity increase and asset. This is the final net conclusion. So compared to Smith, Mayer is likely to have higher debt to equity. No, it will have low debt to equity. Higher debt to assets. No, low debt to assets. This option is incorrect. We have discussed these all one by one. C, lower profitability ROE in the early periods. No, it has a higher ROE in the early periods compared to Smith. Smith has lower ROE in the early periods. It has higher in the later period. It has lower in the later period. This is incorrect as well. This question needs some good deal of time. When you're doing it yourself, try to spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes on this question, because this involves many ratios discussed simultaneously comparatively. Good question. B, Mayors will have higher cash flows from operations. Yes. And lower cash flow from investing. Yes. Why? Because he is capitalizing this cost, so he will consider it as an investing outflow. His operating cash flows would be higher, investing lower. This would be reverse for Smith, because he is expensing them, so his operating cash flows would be lower, investing cash flows would be higher. So that makes B to be your correct option, and B it is. Next question. A reconciliation of the beginning and ending carrying values of each class of property, plant and equipment is required for firms reporting under what? This is an added knowledge you need to know. Requirement for disclosures under IFRS related to long-lived assets or non-current assets are much more extensive. So this is basically the requirement under IFRS, that you need to reconcile the beginning and ending carrying values of each class of property, plant and equipment. This requirement is specifically under IFRS, because disclosure requirement under IFRS are more extensive, more detailed. That's something you need to know. There is no science in it. This is a requirement, so we need to know it as a fact, right? So that makes B to be the correct option. Which set of accounting standards require firms to disclose estimated amortization expense for the next 5 years on intangible assets? Now, this is a fact we need to know under the US GAAP. US GAAP explicitly requires that estimate amortization expense for the next 5 years must be disclosed. And we must accept it as a fact, because what standard says we'll have to follow. B. Okay, this requires some computation. This information pertains to equipment owned by Brigade Company. Cost of equipment is given, estimated residual value is given, estimated useful life is given, depreciation method is given, straight line, accumulated depreciation at the end of year 3. Okay. Straight line method is to be calculated. Depreciation method is straight line method. So what you do for straight line method depreciation is cost minus residual value or the salvage value divided by the estimated life. It means 8,000 by 5, $1,600 every year. This is the depreciation charge every year. What do we need? The accumulated depreciation, total depreciation at the end of the 3rd year. Multiply this with 3. You will get the total depreciation for 3 years. Quite simple, $4,800. C is the total depreciation charge in 3 years. Right. Question number 9. In the early years of an asset's life, a firm that chooses an accelerated depreciation method, when the depreciation charge is higher in the early period and lower in the later periods. In the early years of an asset's life, a firm that chooses an accelerated depreciation method instead of using straight line depreciation method will tend to have what? Now let us discuss these options one by one. It's a good question. Since you have chosen accelerated depreciation, resultantly your depreciation charge would be higher. When depreciation charge would be higher, your net income would be lower. Simple as that. So, if you have chosen accelerated depreciation, you will have a low net income. Agreed. What about equity? Since net income eventually closes in equity, you have a lower net income. Resultantly, equity would be lower also. The second part of this option is also correct. We need to look no further, but skipping B and C means not doing the justice to this question. I recommend strongly for CIA, for CMA and for CFA, you must do each option. You must convince yourself why the right is right and why the wrong is wrong. That is very essential for getting deeper understanding and of course increasing your probability of getting a pass on the final exam. Look at the option B as well. Lower depreciation expense, wrong. Accelerated depreciation results in higher depreciation charge in the early years. Low turnover ratios, assets turnover, that is sales upon average total assets. Since you are charging higher depreciation, resultantly your average total assets will fall. Denominator falls, the ratio would improve, not fall, not lower. Higher turnover ratios, higher depreciation, that's the reason this option has been cancelled. Next is the higher return on equity and return on assets. We have just agreed that in almost every case, return on equity is less than 1. Why? Because your income, return on equity is your income upon average equity. Income would be less than equity, most of the cases. So these ratios will always be. So whenever the ratio, whichever ratio is less than 1, any number, same number added to the numerator and denominator will cause the ratio to improve. And any number, same number deducted from the numerator and denominator will cause the ratio to fall. Same is true for return on assets. Now what will happen? Since you have charged depreciation, that will reduce your net income. It will also reduce your assets in the denominator, equity in the denominator, and ROE, assets in the ratio ROA. So both numerator and denominator are falling. So you will have lower return on equity. You will have lower return on assets, not higher. Now you are convinced. You are absolutely sure that A is the right answer. Next. Novak Incorporated owns equipment with a historical cost of $20,000, a useful life of 5 years, an estimated salvage value of $5,000 using double declining balance method. Double declining balance method. Those who have done CMA or they have studied external financial reporting section A, they will know what is double declining method. Double declining method is the double of straight line depreciation rate. Like if an asset is about to has a life of 5 years, which means the asset will lose 20% of its value each year. 1 by 5 of the asset is gone in 1 year. This is the straight line percentage, 20%, 20%, 20%, and for the next 5 years, the total will be 100%. In double declining, what we do, we double this percentage and use this percentage for our accelerated depreciation method. What is the accelerated depreciation method? Let me show you. Depreciation charge will be very high in the early periods. How many years? For 3 years. So we using double declining balance method, that is 40% we've just calculated. The depreciation expense in year 3. First of all, in year 1, the depreciation charge will be 40% of the original cost. Depreciation charge will be $8,000. What the depreciation be in the next year? 40% of the balance. What is the balance? Original historical cost less depreciation charge so far. 20 less 8, 12, 40%, that gives you $4,800. What would be the depreciation in the third year? 40% of the net book value. What is the net book value now? $20,000 less 8 less 4,800. Whatever remains would give you the depreciation. So 20 less 8, 12, 12 less 48 times 40%, it's 2,880. This is called the double declining balance accelerated depreciation method. Depreciation was very high in the first year, lower and very low in the third year. This is a long method. It's a long method. We got the result. Let me tell you a quickie that can help you solve this question much faster. All you need to do is simply calculate the depreciation for the first year at 40%. 40% of 20,000, that is 8,000, right? What you do in the next year, take 60%. What is 60? 100 minus 40. 60% of 8,000, that gives you 4,800. In the next year, what you do? Same thing, 60% of 4,800. You get the exact result in a much shorter time. And there's a twist in this question, because if we charge 2880 in the last year, 4800 depreciation in the second year, 8000 in the third year, the total depreciation should not be more than 20 less 5, should not be more than 15,000. But in this case, 2880, 4800 plus 8000, the total depreciation goes beyond 15,000. By what amount? 680. Now that is not allowed. This shouldn't happen. Your depreciation should not be more than 15,000, otherwise your salvage value will be higher, the net book value would be lower. So in this case, instead of charging 2880 in the third year, the calculation is fine. The way I've told you, that will work. But what you need to remember is that we cannot charge more depreciation that our net book value falls below salvage value. So in this case, this 680 extra must be netted off with the depreciation charge in the third year. So 2880 less 680, it means the depreciation in the third year should be 2200, so that we are left with the exact $5,000, that is the salvage value of the asset at the end of the third year. So that makes A to be the correct option. That was a twist that must be remembered. It is. Next, Zernizek, or whatever the name is, company buys a delivery vehicle for $60,000 and expects to drive the vehicle for 400,000 kilometers. That's the total distance the vehicle will cover over 4 years. At the end of which the firm expects to be able to sell the vehicle for 10,000 euros. At the end of year 2, the vehicle has been driven for 250,000 kilometers. That's the distance covered. If this company depreciates the vehicle by units of production method, means based upon the kilometers driven, its carrying value at the end of year 2. Simple calculation, no science involved. In this case, we have to calculate depreciation per kilometer driven. In this case, the cost is $60,000, right? Salvage value expected is $10,000, not dollars, euros. That will give you the depreciable base. This depreciable base is to be depreciated over a total distance of 400,000 kilometers. If you solve them all, you get depreciation rate of $0.125 per kilometer driven. Now, if the vehicle has been driven for these many kilometers, what is the carrying value? We can calculate quite easily. Carrying value is equal to original historical cost less the accumulated depreciation or the total depreciation charged so far. What is the depreciation rate? $0.125 per kilometer driven. How many kilometers have been driven? 250. And that's simple. $60,000 less 0.125 multiplied by 250 is 31250 less 60 gives you 28750. This is the carrying value. This is the total depreciation charge so far. So that makes A to be your correct option. A it is. Vasco Limited purchased a unit of heavy equipment 1 year ago for £500,000 and capitalized it as a long-lived asset. Because of demand for equipment of this type has grown significantly, Vasco believes the fair value of its equipment has increased to £600,000. Fair value has gone up. If Vasco revalues its equipment to $600,000 from £500,000 to £600,000, what will be the most likely effect on Vasco's financial results compared to not revaluing the equipment? Revaluing versus not revaluing, how will it affect? Let us see every item one by one. First case, net income will be higher in the period of revaluation. First of all, revaluation surplus is not income. So how can your net income be higher? This is the first revaluation. It's not the subsequent revaluation that might result in some gain to be booked in income statement. It's the first revaluation, can't be considered as income. This is wrong. Right? Net income will be lower in the periods following the revaluation. That makes little sense. Now asset has been revalued upward to $600,000, mean the value has gone up, the carrying value is higher. This would result in higher depreciation charge. This higher depreciation charge will result in lower net income, and it will result in lower equity and the lower ratios on return on asset and all those. So in this case, of course, net income will be lower in the periods following revaluation. Makes perfect sense. The debt to equity ratio, debt upon equity, how is it affected? The debt to equity ratio will be unaffected. Wrong. How can it be unaffected? Revaluation impacts your equity. Net income change impacts your equity. How does it not affect your debt to equity ratio? This is wrong as well. So B is the right option. B it is. Next, under IFRS, if a firm reports investment property using the fair value model, unrealized gains and losses on investment property are. For this, we need to consult this table. Investment property under IFRS, property for rent, capital gains or both. If you use cost model, you have an alternative fair value model. Any increase or decrease in fair value, that's what we are interested in. Any increase or decrease in the fair value of the investment property, it is treated in income statement. So if you have kept your investment property at fair value, any increase or decrease in fair value is considered as a part of income statement. It's a part of earnings. So you need to recognize on the income statement as earning. Under the US GAAP, there is no such category. GAAP does not have any such category of investment properties. Right? So in this case, if the property is given on rent, you receive rental income. Rental income considered as a gain, or any capital gain, if the value of the property goes up, it is considered as a part of income as well. So you have two models to follow, either use the cost model or the fair value model. So right in this case, since the property has been kept at the fair value method, so in this case, any gain and losses, unrealized gain and losses on property, they will be considered as a part of your income statement. So recognize on the income statement. That makes B to be the correct option. Next, question number 14. Warren Incorporated purchases franchise rights with an estimated useful life of 10 years. Okay, franchise has a life of 10 years. Let us mark this down. And a trademark that can be renewed every 5 years. Under IFRS, Warren will recognize amortization expense. First of all, we must remember, we must note it down, amortization is only made for those assets that have limited life. Since this life is limited to 10 years, it means this would be subjected to amortization. Definite life means it would be amortized. So it means the franchise rights would be amortized. What about the trademark? Trademark that can be renewed every 5 years. Since it's renewable trademark, it has indefinite life. When an intangible asset has indefinite life, in that case, we conduct yearly impairment review. At least that is done on an annual basis. So indefinite life based intangible asset is reviewed for impairment yearly. On this, the US GAAP and IFRS on the same page, same requirement in the US GAAP, same in the IFRS. So it means one of these assets, the first one, franchise right, will be amortized. The other one will be tested for impairment every year. Right? So that makes only one of these, A, to be your correct option. A it is. Next, in accounting for property, plant and equipment, the cost model, companies are required to disclose both gross assets value and accumulated debt. This is applicable for both under IFRS and US GAAP. Under both regimes, reporting regimes, you need to disclose the gross assets value, the original historical cost, and the accumulated depreciation for all the assets. That's the correct statement. It's applicable under the both regimes, so that will be B, both IFRS and US GAAP. Alright, next question number 6. Train Incorporated cash flow from operations in 2008 was 14 million. Okay, Train paid 8 million cash to acquire a franchise at the beginning of 2008 and was expensed in 2008. The whole of this amount was considered as an operating outflow. It means this 14 million has been obtained after deducting this 8 million. If train had elected to amortize the cost of franchise over 8 years, then this cash flow would not have been considered or would not have been deducted out of the operating activities. Your operations would have shown extra 8 million. So your operating cash flow would have been 14 plus 8, 22 million. Right now, another question arises. If 14 million is operating cash flow and this 8 million is now considered as investing cash outflow, this would have been added back to your operating cash flow. Your operating cash flow would have been 22 million. Some of you might think that this 8 million intangible, now it has been amortized. It's an asset. It will be amortized over 8 years. So every year amortization charge must be 1 million. So you might elect 21 million, but that would be wrong. The reason is that amortization is a non-cash expense. It does not affect your cash flow from operation. Result will still be 22 million, right? So that's the reason B still is your correct option. Next, Scoobert Incorporated acquired 100% of another firm as a parent. As a result of the acquisition, Scoobert reports on its balance sheet a patent with 5 years remaining and carrying value of 2 million. 5 years life, 2 million is carrying value. And of course, as a result of acquisition, there is a goodwill with a carrying value of 4 million. Using straight line method, total amortization expense in the first year of these two intangibles. Remember, goodwill is not amortized. Yes, this patent will be amortized over the period of 5 years. That is 2 million divided by 5, result in $400,000. That is fine. But goodwill is not amortized. Goodwill is reviewed for impairment at each reporting unit level. Like we have a subsidiary A, subsidiary B, subsidiary D, subsidiary F, and so on. Goodwill related to each subsidiary will be tested for impairment for each subsidiary level, each reporting unit level. It is not amortized. Goodwill is not amortized. It is tested for impairment at each reporting unit level. So it means only the amortization charge will be related to your patent, and that will be $400,000. That means B. B it is. Next, the most likely result of increasing the estimated useful life of a depreciable asset. When the life of the asset is increased, resultantly you have extended useful life, the depreciation charge will fall. When the depreciation charge will fall every year, your net profit would be higher, your retained earnings, your equity would be higher, right? So your net profit would increase. Without doubt, A is the right answer. We can click and go on, but we must consider B and C as well. B says assets turnover will increase. Assets turnover is sales upon average total assets. Since the life of the asset has gone up, the depreciation charge has fallen. So your average total assets balance goes up. Denominator goes up. The turnover ratio should fall, not increase. Return on assets. Return on assets, as I told you, they're mostly less than 1. They're mostly less than 1. And we have just discussed if the ratio is less than 1, increase in your net profit because of less depreciation and increase in your assets because of less depreciation. Same number added in the numerator and denominator will cause the ratio to go up, not decrease. C is the right answer. I mean, A is the right answer. B and C are both incorrect. A it is. A manufacturing firm shuts down production at one of its plants and offers the facility for rent. Right? Based on the market for similar properties, the firm determines that the fair value of the plant is 500,000 euros more than its carrying value. Plant has 500,000 euros more value than the current book value. Right? This plant was originally used by the firm. Now it is being planned to rent it out. If this firm uses the cost model for plant and equipment and the fair value model for investment property, should it recognize a gain or loss? Let us see first. This is what we do. First, this was an owner-occupied property. Now we are going to rent it out as an investment property. Right? This was the first case. We had it owned as our own, under our own use. Now it's being rented out as an investment property under the IFRS. There has been an increase in value of the asset by 500,000 euros. What should we do with this gain? Treat this revaluation, this gain, recognize this gain only if it reverses previously recognized losses. This 500,000 euros gain can only be considered as an income if it reverses the previously recognized loss. Since there is no such loss written off, it means we cannot consider this $500,000 loss or gain as a part of your income statement, right? So for that you need to read your theory. So it says no, because the increase in value does not reverse a previously recognized loss. There is no such detail given that it writes off or reverses the previously recognized loss. We have another question that is similar to it. It will further enhance your understanding. An IFRS reporting firm reclassified a building it's owned from owner occupied to an investment property. Same thing. Owner occupied to an investment property. The fair value of the building is greater than the carrying value. Just like the same question. So under the fair value model for investment property, the firm will recognize a gain only if it reverses a previously recognized loss. If there is no previously recognized loss, there is no gain to be reported in the income statement. So that makes A to be the correct option. It was the continuance of the previous question we have done. Next, a firm revalues its long-lived assets upwards. All other things equal, which of the following financial impacts is least likely to occur? Least likely to occur. Assets have been revalued upward. Higher earnings in the revaluation period. Yes, if a revaluation reverses the previous write-off we have just discussed, then this write-off, which was previous write-off, we will take this revaluation to earnings. So earnings can be higher. This is possible. Revaluation gain, if it reverses the previous write-off, this revaluation surplus or gain will be reported as income. So it means your income statement goes up, your earning goes up, your retained earnings, as well as your equity goes up. That will happen. A is possible. We need to find the one that is least likely. Lower solvency ratio. Solvency ratio, debt to equity is one of the ratios, for example. Since your equity is going up, this ratio will fall. Yes, lower solvency ratio. Agree. What will not happen is this. Higher profitability in the period after revaluation. No. Since the asset has been revalued upward, depreciation charge would be higher. When the depreciation charge goes up, your net profits and earnings will go down. There will be lower profitability in the periods after revaluation. That is in fact the incorrect option, and that was what we were looking for. C is the right answer. For a firm that uses the cost basis for valuing its long-lived assets, fair value is consideration when calculating a gain or loss on what? Let us first see the slide. The question says, for a firm that uses the cost basis for valuing its long-lived asset in the US GAAP, fair value is a consideration when calculating gain and loss. Is it in sale? We don't see any fair value here in sale. Is it abandonment of an asset? We don't see any fair value. Yes, fair value is a consideration when the asset is being exchanged for another asset. Fair value of new assets, if greater than net book value of the old asset, there is a gain. Fair value of new asset, if it's less than net book value of the old asset, it's a loss. Fair value is a subject when there is an exchange. Fair value is not a subject when the asset is being abandoned or when it is being disposed. So without doubt, if you have read your theory, C would be the right answer. The revaluation model for investment property is permitted. Revaluation model of investment property is neither permitted under the US GAAP nor permitted under the IFRS. We have the cost and fair value method, but revaluation method, it is not permitted neither under IFRS or US GAAP, both. That makes C to be the correct option. Next, an impairment write-down is least likely to decrease a company's what? Again, we will have to see every option in detail. Impairment write down means you have charged a write down against the asset has fallen, resultantly result in certain changes. Assets fall, yes, they do. Future depreciation expense, since the asset is at lower value, the depreciation expense will be lower as well. That is correct also. We need to find the one that is not correct, that's least likely to happen. Let's see, debt upon equity. Since you have written down this asset, it will result in a loss, and loss expense reduces equity. Reduction in equity reduces the denominator, resultantly this ratio improves. So there is no decrease in this ratio, rather this ratio is increasing. Rest of these A and C, they are falling. So that makes B to be the correct option. So you need to read every option. You need to convince yourself why the right is right, why the wrong is wrong. Alright, here we go. Lakeside Company recently determined that one of its processing machines has become obsolete after 7 years of use. Unexpectedly, it has no salvage value. The machine was being depreciated over useful economic life of 10 years. Now let's take some imaginary numbers. Let's say $140,000 was the original historical cost. No salvage value means we were depreciating this machine at the rate of 140 by 10 years, that is $14,000 depreciation per year. But it was worthless, or it became obsolete after 7 years. It means the depreciation that we should have charged was $20,000. We have been charging depreciation $14,000 every year, whereas the depreciation should have been $20,000. So which of the following statement is most consistent with this discovery? Lakeside Company will owe back taxes? No. In fact, we have because of this change, our previous year profits are lower. So we might require some refund from IRS rather than paying back taxes. Wrong. Our previous year incomes were overstated. We have paid more tax than we should have. Historically, economic depreciation was overstated. No. Economic depreciation was understated. Depreciation should have been 20, not 14. Incorrect. Historically, economic depreciation was understated. We had been charging 14, whereas the depreciation should have been 20. C is the correct option. Next. Part of a major restructuring of business units, General Security, an industrial conglomerate operating solely in the US and subject to the US GAAP. This company recognizes significant impairment losses. Remember, in the US GAAP, write down once charge cannot be reversed. The investor relationship group is preparing an information packet for shareholders, employees, and the media. Which of the following statement is least accurate? During the year of the write down, retained earnings will fall. Deferred taxes, we will discuss taxes in the future as well. Yes, since the asset base is falling, so the deferred taxes will fall as well. We'll discuss in detail. Because the asset has been written off, the retained earnings will fall as a loss. Equities write down of asset is charged as a loss against the income, so retained earnings will fall. The deferred taxes will fall. It's a true statement. We need to find the one that is least accurate. A is accurate. B. The write down are reported as a component of income from continuing operation. Yes, it's a loss for the period. It's a correct statement. Write down taken on asset values can be reversed in later years. No. US GAAP does not allow write-offs. Once the asset has been written down, it cannot be reversed under the US GAAP. So that makes C to be the correct option. Next. Rosedale Incorporated buys a small manufacturing plant with an estimated useful life of 12 years. The building includes 2 built-in machines that are expected to be replaced after 4 years and 6 years. There will be replacement after 4 years and 6 years. Under international financial reporting standards, Rosedale should do what? Must have a single depreciation schedule for plant? Of course not. We have 2 different assets, one with a life of replacement of 4 years, one for 6 years. Must have separate depreciation schedule for the machines and the building. Remember, IFRS requires separate depreciation for different assets for the firms. US GAAP allows component depreciation, but it is not required. Under the IFRS, it is a requirement to charge separate depreciation for different components of the same asset. US GAAP does not require as such. There is no such requirement under the US GAAP. But US GAAP allows, if the firm wants, they can charge separate depreciation. There is no requirement as such in the US GAAP. But IFRS explicitly requires firm to charge separate depreciation for different assets or components of the same asset. That makes B. Must have separate depreciation schedule for the machines and the buildings. B is the right answer. Component depreciation is required, as I said. The component depreciation required under IFRS, not under the US GAAP. US GAAP allows you to charge component depreciation, but it is not a requirement. But it is a requirement under the IFRS. Now, let me tell you what is component depreciation like. Let's say this is your airplane. And these are the engines, jet engines. These items themselves are very expensive. So the body of the plane is depreciated separately under the IFRS, and engines, considering a significant part of the main asset, is depreciated separately. This is a requirement under IFRS, but there is no such requirement under the US GAAP. GAAP allows you component depreciation. If you want to, good. If you don't want to, there is no restriction. So that makes B to be the correct option, and B it is. Taking an impairment of long-lived asset will result. When you impair an asset, what happens? Your net income falls. Your assets fall, right? Your retained earnings fall. Your equity falls. So what will happen if the asset is written down, it is impaired? What will happen to the low debt to equity ratio? Debt to equity. Once the asset is written off, equity falls as a loss. This ratio would improve because of a lower denominator. This ratio would be higher, not lower. Incorrect. Higher future returns on assets. Return on asset is ROA. It's equal to your net income upon average total assets. Since assets have been written down, assets are now being reported at a lower value. A lower denominator will result in higher ratios. That's true. Your future return on assets would be higher. What about the deferred tax liability? As I said, we will discuss taxes in detail in the next reading. Since the asset base is now lower, your deferred tax liabilities will result in a lower numbers. We will discuss in detail. Deferred tax liabilities will be lower, not higher. Right, so that makes B to be the correct option. B it is. For a firm to use the revaluation model for balance sheet reporting of long-lived assets, the firm must choose which assets of each type to revalue and which to report at cost. There is no such permission. No cherry picking. You cannot selectively revalue some assets and not revalue the other. No cherry picking. No cherry picking allowed. You will apply the same model for all assets of all similar type. Cherry picking is not allowed. This option is incorrect. A firm must report under the US GAAP. US GAAP does not allow revaluation method. Wrong. US GAAP only allows the cost model. C. Then of course for revaluation model there must be an active market for the assets so that we can use to revalue the asset. That is correct. An active market must exist for the assets to be revalued. That makes C to be the correct option. C it is. Next. JME acquired an asset on January 1st, 2004 for $60,000 cash. At that time, JME estimated the asset would last 10 years and have no salvage value. During 2006, after 2 years, JME estimated the remaining life of the asset to be only 3 more years with salvage value of $3,000. If JME uses straight line depreciation, what is the depreciation expense for 2006? First of all, this is what you paid. Asset was expected to have no salvage value, so the depreciation charge each year was $6,000. So what we did in 2004 and 2005, we charged $6,000 depreciation in the 2004 year, we charged $6,000 depreciation in 2005. Total depreciation charge was $12,000. Cost of the asset was 60. It means the net book value of the asset was $48,000 in 2006. Now in 2006 we realized that this asset 48,000, the value of the asset is 48,000 in 2006. It will last only for next 3 years, and this will be the new salvage value. So this is the new base, this is the new salvage value, and this asset will last for 3 years only. 48 less 3, 45. That is the depreciable base upon 3. It means every year the depreciation from 2006 onward will be 15,000. For 2006, 7 and 8, an asset will be reduced to its salvage value. So that makes A to be the correct option, and A it is. Intangible assets with the finite useful life, limited life. Remember, intangible assets with limited life, they are amortized. They are amortized, but not on actual lives. How come we know the actual lives? Wrong. They are not amortized, correct, but are tested for impairment. At least they are amortized, but they are not tested for impairment. Other way around. This is wrong. Only goodwill is tested for impairment, and the assets, intangible assets with unlimited life. So the intangible with definite life, they are amortized over the expected useful life. There is an important point to remember. Let's say we have an intangible asset, a patent for example. A patent is an intangible asset with limited life. It has two lives. One is the legal life, other is its useful economic life. So we need to amortize. Which of these two lives we will consider? We will consider the one that is lower. If the legal life is lower, we'll take the legal life as the amortization base. If the useful life is lower, we will take the useful life as the amortization base. That was the point to be remembered. So remember, intangible assets with finite or limited life, they are amortized over their expected useful lives or economic or legal life, whichever is lower. C is the right answer. Moving on to question number 33. Lucille Edgewater, a CFA, is analyzing PAF company which reports its long-lived assets using the revaluation model. Of course, under IFRS, US GAAP doesn't allow revaluation model. Edgewater needs to determine what PAF's carrying value of property, plant and equipment would be under the historical cost model, and which of the PAF's intangible assets have finite useful life. Will these items be disclosed in PAF's financial statements? Of course, both of these, carrying value of the property, plant and equipment, as well as which of these intangibles which are listed on the balance sheet have all these information, both of these items, they must be given on the balance sheet, they must be disclosed. Both of these items are required to be disclosed, so that makes B to be your correct option. 3 years ago, Ranchero Corporation purchased equipment for a process used in production, and the cost of acquisition was $3 million. At the end of last year, Ranchero determined that fair value of the equipment was greater than its book value. Right? No impairment losses have been recognized on the equipment because the fair value is higher than the book value. Assuming Ranchero follows international financial reporting standards, what is the impact on its total assets turnover and return on assets equity reporting the value of equipment on the balance sheet at fair value? Now, if you are using IFRS, because under the US GAAP revaluation model is not allowed, but if under the IFRS, if you revalue the assets upwards, assets will go up. How would it affect your return on equity and total assets turnover? We know total assets turnover is sales upon average total assets. Since the assets are being revalued upward, this ratio will fall. What about return on equity? Return on equity is net income upon equity, average total equity. Since this revaluation goes to equity, equity goes up. Because of a larger denominator, return on equity will fall. So both will decrease. B is the right answer. Capitalizing interest costs related to company construction of assets for its own use is required by IFRS or US GAAP, both. Remember, I would like to discuss this point to some extent. When asset is being constructed, whether it is planned to be used within the company or to be sold, the period when the asset is when we start constructing the asset till it ends, all the interest cost, the borrowing cost, it is capitalized. All the interest cost is capitalized. Once the asset is completed, any interest payment after the completion of the asset, it will be considered as an expense, both under IFRS and US GAAP. They agreed to this on both IFRS as well as US GAAP. Allocating an intangible asset's cost to the income statement over time is known as depreciation is for tangible assets. Amortization is used for intangible assets. Depletion is used for mines and quarries, etc. So that makes B to be our correct option. And as you can see, B it is. Dubious company bought land for company use 5 years ago for 2 million euros and presents its balance sheet value as 2.2 million euros. So it clearly means that it would have been revalued somewhere in the past. If the fair value of the land decreases to 1.8 million, what we will do? So first, what would have happened? From 2 million euros, the land was revalued upward to 2.2 million euros. Now its fair value has fallen to 1.8 million euros, indicating that the prior 0.2 million euro that was included in equity as a revaluation surplus must be reversed, and then further down from 2 to 1.8 million euro, this 0.2 million euro will be the loss for the period. So we can say that there will be overall a reduction in equity of 0.4 million euros, out of which 0.2 million will be recognized as a loss for the period. So recognize 0.2 million euros or 200,000 euros as a loss and decrease shareholder equity by 400,000 euros, 0.4 million. So that makes B to be the correct option. Under normal circumstances, intangible assets with indefinite lives, they are not amortized. But they are subject to impairment. So that straightforward is a C, the correct option. Next, on January 1st, 2004, GME purchased a truck that cost $24,000. The truck had an estimated useful life of 5 years and 4,000 salvage value. The amount of depreciation expense recognized in 2006, assuming that GME uses the double declining balance method. How do you find the percentage in double declining balance method? 2 upon the estimated life multiplied by 100. That will give you 40%. So this is the depreciation rate you will use. So for 2004, 2005 and 2006, how you will calculate the depreciation? The first year depreciation will be 24,000 multiplied by 40%. So that will give you $9,600. Next year, the shortcut would be take this $9,600, multiply this with 100 minus 40, that is 60%. So 9,600 multiplied by 60% gives you 5,760. Next year, what would be the depreciation? Take this number now, 5,760, and multiply it with 60%, and you will get 3,456. That is the perfect option. A is the right answer. Now let's say if you are required to calculate the book value at the end of 2006. So what you will do? 2004, 2005, 2006. So the first 2004 years book value would be 24,000 multiplied by 60%, because 40% represents depreciation, 60% will be the book value. It will be 14,400. Now what will be the book value at the end of 2005? Take 14,400 and multiply it with 60%. It's going to be 8640. What would be the book value at the end of year 2006? Take 8640 and multiply it with 60%. It will give you 5184. So this is the quick way to calculate your net book value at the end of each year, and this is the way to calculate depreciation for each particular year. So we got the result. It was A. Next, question number 40. On January 1st to next 4, Cayman Corporation bought manufacturing equipment for $30 million. On 31st December 2006, Cayman determined the equipment was impaired and recognized $5 million impairment loss in its income statement. As of December 31st 2007, the fair value of the equipment exceeded the book value of $7 million. Cayman may recognize gain in 2007 income statement if it reports under IFRS or US GAAP. Remember, I hope you would have gone through your reading well. Once the asset has been impaired, if the value goes up, if the fair value goes up, under the US GAAP, impairment loss cannot be reversed, but under IFRS, yes. So it could be reported as a gain if it is reported under IFRS but not under the US GAAP. US GAAP does not allow reversal of impairment loss. So that makes B to be the correct option. Next, compared to firms that expense cost, firms that capitalizes expenses will have what? The firm that capitalizes expenses, it will have lower cash flow from operations. No, since it has been capitalized, has not been expensed, resultantly your cash flow from operations would be higher, not lower. Higher leverage ratios. Leverage ratio is debt upon equity. Since it has been capitalized, not expensed, resultantly no depreciation, equity would be higher. Having a higher denominator will cause this ratio to fall. So your leverage will be low, not high. Wrong. Even if you take debt over debt plus equity, it is going to be lower. So this is not right. So it has to be B then. Why B? It's because the capitalized expense becomes an asset. And this asset will now be depreciated over an extended period of time in the future. Not all at once. So that's the reason there will be low variability in income if the expense has been capitalized. So that makes B to be the correct option, and B it is. Next, a company acquires an intangible asset for $100,000 and expects it to have a value of $20,000 at the end of its 5 years life. If the company amortizes the asset using the double declining balance method, amortization expense in year 4 of the asset's life will be closest to what? So year 1, 2, 3 and 4. What will be the double declining percentage? 2 upon the estimated life multiplied by 100, that's 40%. So the first year depreciation will be 100,000 times 40%, that is 40,000. Next year depreciation would be 40,000 60%. This is the shortcut I told you. 40,000 60%, that is 24,000. Further down the road, 24,000 60%, that will give you 14,400. Now this is interesting. At the end of the 4th year, you should not take 14,400 60%. The reason being, your total depreciation or amortization should not be more than $80,000, which means 40,000 has been charged in the first year, 24 in the second year, 14,400 in the third year. You can only charge 1,600 amortization in the 4th year so as to give you the total accumulated amortization of $80,000. Thereby, the amortization in the 4th year should be 1,600, thereby leaving $20,000 as the salvage value for the 5th year. So this is going to be your amortization in year 4. That makes A to be the correct option. Next, Mercell Incorporated is a large manufacturing company based in the US but also operating in several European countries. Mercell has long-lived assets currently in use that are valued on the balance sheet at $600 million. This includes previously recognized impairment loss of $80 million. The original cost of the asset was $750 million. The fair value of the asset was determined in a professional appraisal to be $690 million. Assuming that Mercell reports under the US GAAP, the new appraisal of the asset value most likely results in what? Since we are talking about the US GAAP, once the asset has been impaired, if the fair value goes up, the previously written off loss cannot be reversed. So there is going to be no change in Mercell's financial statements. The reason being, in the US GAAP, impairment loss cannot be reversed. And moreover, these assets are currently in use, so this exception does not apply. Therefore, Mercell may not revalue the assets upward. Increases are generally prohibited with the exception of assets held for sale. So US GAAP does not allow fair value model for long-lived assets. That makes C to be the correct option. C is the correct option. Next, which of the following statements about the role of depreciable lives and salvage values in the computation of depreciation expense for financial reporting is most accurate? Companies are specifically required to disclose data about estimated salvage values in the footnotes to the financial statement. There is no such requirement. It's purely the management's prerogative to select the estimated salvage value. Not required. B. The estimated useful life of the same depreciable asset should be the same regardless of which company owns the asset. No, this is not correct as well. Estimated life could be different. Same asset can be valued at different estimated life by different companies depending upon the usage. So this is not true as well. Most accurate statement is C. Depreciable lives and salvage values are chosen by the management and allow for the possibility of income manipulation. Since it is selected by the management, that's true. And there's also a risk, downside risk, that it allows the management to manipulate income statement by changing the depreciable life and salvage value. So that makes C to be the correct option. Next, Walsh Furniture has purchased a machine with a 7 years useful life for $250,000. At the end of its life, it will have an estimated salvage value of $15,000. Using the double declining balance method, the depreciation expense in year 2 would be closest to. So double declining balance method means 2 upon the estimated life, which is 7, times 100 gives you a percentage depreciation rate of 28.57%. So first year depreciation would be $250,000 multiplied by 28.57, and this gives you 71425. 71425. Next year depreciation would be 71425 multiplied by 100 minus 28.57. If you remember, previously if the depreciation rate was 40, the next year depreciation was calculated by 100 minus 40, 60%. So we'll do the same thing, 100 less 28.57%. Simplifying this will give you approximately 51019, which is A, and that makes A to be your correct option. Next, 46. Which of the following statements comparing straight line depreciation method to alternative depreciation method is least accurate? Mind the word, least accurate. Companies that use straight line depreciation method will have higher book values for the assets on the balance sheet than the companies that use the accelerated depreciation method. Straight line depreciation method means the depreciation charge stays the same throughout the life of the asset, whereas accelerated depreciation method means more depreciation charge in the early years and less depreciation in the later years. Resultantly, under accelerated depreciation method, book value will be lower. Under straight line method, book value in the early period will be higher. So this is a true statement. Straight line depreciation method will have higher book value for the assets on the balance sheet. It's a true statement. We are looking for the least accurate one. B. Accelerated depreciation method for tax purposes will decrease the amount of taxes paid in early years. Now this is true. Under accelerated depreciation method, depreciation rate would be higher, depreciation expense would be higher. Resultantly, when depreciation is higher, your profit would be lower, and hence your tax payable will be lower as well. So this is a correct statement also. Now look at option C. Accelerated depreciation method will have lower assets turnover ratios than if they use straight line depreciation. Under accelerated depreciation method, depreciation expense would be higher. Resultantly, your assets turnover, which is sales upon your average fixed assets or average total assets, since depreciation will reduce the net book value, so your average total assets at net value will fall. Resultantly, this ratio would rise, not decrease. There will be higher assets turnover, not lower. So this is the least accurate statement, and that's the reason it's the right option. C. Next, Stanham Records obtains 2 intangible assets in a business acquisition: legal rights to reproduce songs valued at 5 million and a trademark valued at 1 million. So we have 2 assets, a legal right of 5 million to reproduce songs and a trademark of 1 million. The trademark expires in 10 years and can be renewed at a minimal cost. Now this is interesting information. Since this trademark is renewable at minimal cost, so its life is unlimited, infinite life. Stenham estimates that 5 years useful life for song rights, which has a value of 5 million. Because much of the song's economic value is realized in their early years, Stenham uses double declining balance amortization. So amortization expense in the first year after the acquisition is closest to. Now we have two assets, song right and a trademark. For a song right, we have 5 million value that needs to be amortized by double declining balance method, that is 2 upon the estimated life multiplied by 100. So that's going to be 40%. So first year amortization is going to be 5 million's 40%, that's 2 million. But this trademark has infinite life since it is renewable at minimal cost, so it will not be amortized, rather it will be tested for impairment. So your only expense for amortization will be 2 million. That makes C to be the correct option. Next, which of the following items is least likely an example of an intangible asset with indefinite life? Least likely. Trademarks that can be renewed at minimal cost. Since they can be renewed at minimal cost, so they have indefinite life. This is the one with indefinite life. We're looking for the one that is least likely. Goodwill, again, it has indefinite life and it is tested for impairment at each reporting unit level. So this is again not the right answer. Acquired patent, yes. Acquired patents are amortized over lower of two lives. Useful life, useful economic life, or legal life given by the patent registration authority, whichever is lower. Useful life and legal life, whichever of these is your lower, is taken as an allocation base on which this acquired patent will be amortized. So this will have limited life, not infinite like A and C. So that is the right option, B. A building owned by a firm is most likely be classified as investment property if the space in the building is rented to other firms. Yes, that's true. The firm uses the building for its corporate headquarters. Since it's for own use, it cannot be classified as investment property. The building is a manufacturing plant or distribution center. Since it's for its own use for the company, it cannot be classified as investment property. So A is the right answer. Next, Slovak company purchased a machine that has an estimated useful life of 8 years for $7,500. Its salvage value is estimated to be $500. What is the depreciation expense for the second year, assuming Slovak uses the double declining balance method of depreciation? So how do we calculate the double declining percentage? 2 upon the estimated life, 2 by 8 multiplied by 100, and that will give you 12.5% times 2, that's 25%. So the first year depreciation will be 7,500 multiplied by 25%, and that's going to be 1875. This is the first year depreciation. Second year would be 1875's time, yes, 75%, and this is going to be 1406.25, and that perfectly matches with your option C, and C is the right answer. Next, a company switching from straight line depreciation to an accelerated method of depreciation, assuming all other revenues and expenses are at the same level for the next period, switching to an accelerated method will most likely increase what? Fixed assets turnover. Assets turnover, fixed, that is sales upon the average fixed assets. Since you are now moving to accelerated depreciation method will result in more depreciation. Resultantly, the net value of the fixed assets will fall, and this lowered denominator will increase the assets turnover. This is a true statement. Without doubt, A is the right answer. Why not B? Total assets on the balance sheet. Total assets on the balance sheet will decrease. Incorrect. We're looking for increase. Net income to sales ratio. Net income upon sales. Sales stays the same, but since there is a high depreciation because of accelerated depreciation, net income will fall, and this will result in lower net income percentage, and this is wrong too. So A is for sure the correct option. Next, a firm acquired investment property for 3 million euros and chooses the fair value model for financial reporting purposes. In year 1, the market value of the investment property decreased by 150,000 euros. In year 2, the market value of the investment property increased by 200,000 euros. On its financial statement for year 2, the firm will do what? Now, first of all, under the fair value model, All gains and losses from changes in the value of investment property are recognized as income. So first year loss 150 will be reported in income statement as a loss, and next year increase in the fair value of the investment property of 200,000 euros will be reported as an income in net income. So 200 gain on its income statement in year 2 and 150 loss, which is not given. So A is the right option. 150 is a loss, not gain. 150 increase in shareholders' equity, wrong. So that makes A to be the correct option, and A it is. Next, accelerated depreciation methods for financial reporting are most likely to have which of the following effects on company's financial ratios during the early, mind the word early, years of an asset life. Higher assets turnover is sales upon average fixed assets or total assets. Since accelerated depreciation method will result in more depreciation, so the net value of average total assets would be lower. Lower denominator means this ratio would be higher. So this is true. Higher assets turnover. Why not B? Lower debt to equity. Debt upon equity means since there is higher depreciation, net income will be lowered. Lower net income means lower equity, so this ratio would be higher, not lower. Wrong. Lower current ratio. There will be no effect on current ratio because it's simply a ratio of current assets upon current liabilities. So this is irrelevant. So that makes A to be the correct option. Next, Spencer Incorporated owns a piece of specialized machinery with a current fair value of $400,000. The original cost of the machinery was $500,000 and to date has generated accumulated depreciation of $140,000. Which of the following must Spencer record on the income statement if it decides to abandon the asset? First of all, the cost this $500,000 and accumulated depreciation $140,000. So the net book value or the carrying value is $360,000. Right? This $360,000 is now going down the drain, finished, gone, khalas takum. So that means the whole of this $360,000, because the asset is being abandoned, it's a loss. That makes B to be the correct option. Next question, number 55. US GAAP least likely requires property, plant and equipment to be tested for impairment when? When events indicate the firm may not recover the asset's carrying value. Yes, this is true under the US GAAP. When an asset is reclassified as held for sale. Yes, it is true under the US GAAP. Now the last option, property, plant and equipment to be tested for impairment at least annually. This is required under the IFRS, not US GAAP. So this is least likely and hence our right option. Next, an analyst determined the following information concerning Franklin Incorporated stamping machine acquired 7 years ago for $22 million. This was the original cost. Straight line method used for depreciation. Useful life estimated to be 12 years. Salvage value originally estimated to be $4 million. So if you calculate the annual depreciation charge, it's $22 million less $4 million upon 12. So it's going to be $1.5 million. This is the depreciation charge each year. The stamping machine is expected to generate $1.5 million per year for 5 more years and will then be sold for $1 million. Under the US GAAP, the stamping machine should be impaired or not impaired. First of all, estimated life was 12 years and now just 5 more years remaining. It means 7 years have gone, which means the accumulated depreciation is 1.5 times 7, 10.5 million. This is the depreciation charge so far over the last 7 years. Now, what is the carrying value or the book value? It is simply equal to original cost minus accumulated depreciation. Is going to be 11.5 million. Okay. Now this is the carrying value or the book value. It further says that the asset will generate 1.5 million per year for the next 5 more years. So it means 5 into 1.5. We expect 8.5 million cash in the next 5 years. This is called undiscounted future cash flows. Under the US GAAP, you need to compare the carrying value or the book value with the undiscounted future cash flows, which indicate the carrying value is more than the undiscounted future cash flows. Asset is impaired. That's all. We are not required to calculate the impairment loss. Just need to see if it is impaired. Yes, it is impaired because the carrying value of 11.5 million exceeds the expected future cash flows of 8.5 million. That makes C to be the correct option. This is the US GAAP model for impairment. Step 1 is recoverability test. You compare your carrying value with the undiscounted future cash flows. Our carrying value was 11.5 million, whereas the undiscounted future cash flows was 8.5 million. This indicates that yes, asset is impaired. In the second step, we compare the carrying value with the fair value. The difference between carrying value and fair value is reported as an impairment loss, and under the US GAAP, it may not be reversed in the subsequent years. So we got the result. C is the right answer. Next, compared with firms that expense costs, the firm that capitalizes cost can be expected to report what? Since the expense has been capitalized, so rather than charging a large charge against income, we are charging depreciation slowly over the life of the asset. So what will happen because of the lower charge against income? So your net income would be higher in the early periods and your equity would be higher in the early periods. So it will have higher assets level and higher equity levels, of course, because higher profit means higher equity. So higher assets level and higher equity levels in the early years of the asset's life, true. Higher assets level, yes. Lower equity, wrong. Lower assets, lower equity, wrong. So that makes A to be the correct option, and A is the right answer. Davis Incorporated is a large manufacturing company operating in several European countries. Davis has long-lived assets that are valued on the balance sheet at 600 million. This includes previously recognized revaluation loss of 80. In the most recent accounting period, the fair value of these assets is in active market 690, which means this previously recognized loss cannot be reversed. Which of the following entries will Davis record under the IFRS revaluation model? Since we are going to value upward by $90 million, out of this $80 million which was previously recognized will now be reversed as a gain on the income statement. The remaining 10 million, it will be reported as a revaluation surplus. So 80 million gain, that will reverse the previous write-off, and the surplus 10 will be reported as revaluation surplus. A is the right answer. Next, Blocker Company is evaluating the following methods of accounting for depreciation of long-lived assets and inventory. Either we can use straight line depreciation method or double declining balance method. Inventory could either be FIFO or LIFO. Assuming deflationary environment where prices are falling, which of the following combinations will result in the highest net income in year one? We have read this in much more detail in our reading related to inventories. When the prices are falling, and if the company follows LIFO, lowered prices will now be charged to CGS, means CGS would be lower, resultantly higher GP, higher net profit, resultantly higher equity, and it will also result in higher current assets. Why? Because the new lower cost goes to the CGS, the older higher cost will go to the inventory. Your current assets will be higher, your working capital will be higher, your current ratio would be higher. This is how you should be able to link things from one. So it means lowered prices, if the prices are falling, FIFO, LIFO would be suitable. And the next part is quite straightforward. Under straight line method, depreciation charge would be lower in year one. So we will use straight line for depreciation method, and we will use LIFO for inventory valuation. So this combination will result in highest profit. Under LIFO, this is the complete detail, and under straight line method means low depreciation early periods, so you will have higher profit. Lower depreciation means lower charge against net income, so net income will be higher. So C is the right result. Next question is a good one. Selected information from financial statements of Salvo Company for the year ended December 31st, 2003 and 4 are given. We have been given the income statement for 2003 and 4, and we have been given the relevant extract, or in fact the whole balance sheet for 2003 and 4. Now, if Salvo had amortized the cost of franchise acquired in 2003, this is the cost of franchise, and all of it was expensed in 2003. If Salvo had amortized the cost of franchise acquired in 2003 over 6 years instead of expensing it, Salvo's return on average total equity for 2x4 would have been what? It's a very good question. Now, when we don't expense cost of franchise, your net income goes up by 6. So the new net income should be 7, but Since now it will be amortized over 6 years, so this 6 million will be divided over 6 million. 1 million will be amortized every year. So it means your net income for 2x3 would be 6. Right? What will be the net income next year? This amortization of -1 every year means your net income in 2x4 will be 8 minus 1, 7. Right? So now we have got our revised income for next 4. We need to calculate the return on equity. So return on equity, we have the profit number with us, that is 7. Well, now we need to calculate the average equity, and that is little twisted. Now to X3 equity needs revision. Why? Because previously we added just 1 million as our profit in retained earning, but now the profit has been revised from 1 to 6, so you have to add this 5 in the retained earnings. Next year, we have added this 8 net income here, which needs to be reduced down from 8 to 7, so 1 must be deducted. But you must not forget that retained earning last year 5 million is carried forward to the next year, so 5 must be added here. Now this is a very tricky part. Please remember, retained earning is to be increased by 5 because the profit went up by net 5 into the next 3. This 5 retained earning goes to the next year also, so it must be added in the next year retained earning as well. So we need to find the average equity, common stock and retained earning. This is your opening equity. 8 plus 6 plus 5 gives you 19. And the closing equity is 8 plus 14 plus 5 that was carried forward minus 1, the reduction in net income. So this gives you a total of 8 plus 14 plus 5 less 1, 26. So 19 plus 26 divided by 2 gives you an average equity number, that is 22.5 million. Now this is your profit for the next 4 and this is your average equity. So 7 upon 22.5 million should give you 31.11%. That closely matches with your option C, and C is your right answer. Next, for impaired long-lived assets, a firm reporting under IFRS is least likely required to disclose what? Circumstances that cause the impairment loss or reversal, yes, it must be reported under IFRS. Amounts of impairment losses and reversals by asset class, yes, it is required under IFRS. This is not right. Estimated probabilities of reversing impairment losses, no such requirement. This is totally a ridiculous option. C is least likely, and that's why it's the right answer. Next, capitalized interest costs are typically reported in the cash flow statement as an outflow from what? Since this interest cost has been capitalized, relates to investing, so it must be reporting as a part of investing. Straightforward questions. A is the right answer. Next question 63. The amortized cost of a trademark is least likely, mind the word, to appear on the firm's balance sheet if the trademark was developed internally. We have read our theory well. Costs of developing a trademark are expensed in the period incurred. But if a trademark is acquired from another firm, or it's a part of acquiring another firm, either the trademark was bought separately or it came to you through acquisition of another firm, in that case it is amortized. So the value of a trademark can be appearing on balance sheet if the trademark was purchased separately or it was obtained as a part of business acquisition. Otherwise, internally developed trademark is expensed, not capitalized. A is the right answer. Next, the average age of a firm's property, plant and equipment can be estimated by dividing what? Average age. This is the formula we use to calculate the average age. We divide the accumulated depreciation with the annual depreciation charge. Like for example, if 100,000 is the balance in accumulated depreciation and every year we charge depreciation expense of 10,000, so that clearly means the average age is 10 years, because the accumulated depreciation divided by per year depreciation charge will indicate the average age of the property, plant and equipment. Straightforward. B was the right answer, and B it is. Next, which of the following statement regarding capitalizing versus expensing is least accurate? Total cash flow is higher with capitalization versus expense. Now this is the wrong statement, least accurate. Why? Because total cash flow stays the same whether we capitalize or whether we expense it. The total cash flow stay the same. In one form it will be appearing in investing, in other it will be operating. So either it's investing or operating, total cash flow stay the same. This is least accurate and the right answer. Why not B? Cash flow from investing is higher with expensing than the capital. This is true. When it's treated as an investing cash flow, so cash flow from investing would be higher. So it's true. It's a correct statement. Capitalization results in higher profitability initially, correct. When it is not expensed, lower expense, but depreciation charge will be slightly higher. So when asset is capitalized, when the expense is capitalized, resultantly there will be less charge against income, just lower depreciation initially. So the profitability would be higher initially. That is correct. C is the right answer. C was the correct option. B was the correct one. We were looking for the one that was incorrect, and that's A. So moving on. An analyst most likely use the average age of depreciable assets using this to estimate the company's what? Near-term financing requirements. Yes, if the average age of the asset is higher than the industry, it means the company might require investments in long-lived assets. So that's the correct option. Need to go no further. Last question. Lacrosse Partners LLC has a franchise agreement with Arnold's Crispy Fry that expires in 7 years, but it is renewable at each expiration date for a nominal fee. If the franchising agreement is initially valued at $60,000, what would be the amortization? Amortization expense in the 6th year will be, since this is an asset with infinite life, why? Because renewal cost very low. So this is an asset with infinite life, so it will not be amortized. So amortization would be 0. Rather, it will be tested for impairment. That makes A to be the correct option.